only 4 out of 5 people on Tinder are normal. I let 5 random strangers from Tinder control my TBR. This was so far out of my comfort zone, so please do like and subscribe, but without any messing around, let's get straight into this video. So first up, I chatted to someone called C, who is real chatterbox. And I asked them just a few questions to get down to a list, and then I gave them a list of books. So first I asked if I should go for a sci-fi book or a fantasy book. These are the 2 genres that I really read in, and they opted for fantasy. Next up, I gave them a list of goals that I have for reading. I want to be really intentional about my reading this year, and so I have 7 goals that I want to read books only from these categories unless it's part of a buddy read or some kind of challenge for the channel. And they opted for the first goal, which is to read books by global majority authors. So I went into my TBR, I had a look through what was high up on it and fit into fantasy by global majority authors, and I then gave them this list of books with a little brief description next to each book just to explain vaguely what it's about, and they opted for the Book of Fallen Leaves. So let's just briefly talk through the Book of Fallen Leaves. Now, this one isn't actually out yet, but I do have an arc of it. It's coming out on the 17th of March, and it's being compared to Shogun meets Game of Thrones. I'm always a little bit wary when publishers compare things to Game of Thrones, because I do think they just go, oh, that's fantasy. It's just like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is fantasy. But I do think this is going to be good. It's from a debut author, and I've seen quite a bit of buzz around it, which means that the publisher is pushing a lot of money into marketing. Generally, they do this when they really believe that a book is going to be successful and that it's a good book. So I'm pretty excited to check this one out. From what I can make out, it has 2 POVs. The first is of an exiled prince who was exiled due to his father's rebellion, and when his family was being put to the sword, he is saved by a peasant girl who I believe is going to be the other POV in the book. So pretty excited. I do love a dual POV narrative, and I don't think it's going to be like Game of Thrones, but I think it'll be good. Now, next up, we have Kieran, who I did have a little bit more of a chat with, which was a pretty low bar, and I asked the same questions. Now, I will say I didn't ask these questions for everyone. Right at the end, I will show you someone who I just asked what book I should read and gave them a bit about my taste and let them pick any book they wanted that wasn't necessarily from my TBR. So we'll see how that goes at the end of the video. But first up, Kieran. Now, this guy's pretty cool. He loves football a lot. Apparently, that was a big part of his personality. I didn't tell him that I hate football because I have very, very basic social skills, which I enacted in this particular case. But first up, I asked him, as before, sci-fi or fantasy, and he opted for sci-fi. So the next question, the list of goals, he went for number 3, which is to read LGBTQ plus authors. I then gave him a list of books by LGBT authors within the sci-fi genre, including The Terraformers, Iron Widow, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and First Sister, and he opted for The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. This is probably Becky Chambers' most famous work, and one that I have been desperate to check out for a while. I adore her Monk and Robot series of novellas. These are full-length novels-ish. I mean, they're 300-400 pages, so they're relatively short. They are sci-fi. I hear there's a lot of found family and coziness to them. This is the first book in a series known as The Wayfarers, and I'm super excited to just get into something cozy, sci-fi, just good vibes. I'll pick a time when I'm in the mood for this one, but I'm hoping to read all of these over the next month and a half or so. So far, 2 very normal interactions, but as I mentioned at the start of this video, 4 out of 5 people on Tinder are normal, and that 1/5, don't worry, will come up. But first, let's do another normal person. So next, I spoke to someone called Amara, who is from Thailand, which made me start to doubt how Tinder works, because I have no idea how I ended up matched to her, but regardless, I asked her the same question as before, sci-fi or fantasy, and Amara didn't actually have a preference. She kind of wanted both, and so I thought, aha, here's a twist to the video, and I pulled together a list of sci-fi fantasy books that kind of merge the genres of sci-fi and fantasy. We had Cello's Gate, which is indie published, June Messiah, which is the continuation of the June series that I recently started and kind of the OG sci-fantasy book. We had Winnowing Flame, which I had thought was fantasy, but in trying to research sci-fantasy books on my TBR, I came across this as apparently a sci-fantasy book, and that is by a female author. And finally, we had the 6th Dungeon Crawler Call book, Bedlam Bride, which again is the continuation of a series, and this was the one that Amara opted for, and so I will be reading over the next month and a half the 6th Dungeon Crawler Call series. Now, I've talked about Dungeon Crawler Call a reasonable amount on this channel, and everyone everywhere has talked about Dungeon Crawler Call, but if you're not familiar, it is about a man and his cat trying to survive the apocalypse in a game show run by crazy aliens. It's a lit RPG. It's the only lit RPG I've actually read, and it's definitely a genre I want to explore more of. But I'm very excited, obviously, to continue on with this series. I'm seeing Matt Dinnerman in March, so I really need to try and catch up before then, and hopefully also bag myself an arc of the 8th book. Yeah. Very, very hyped for this one. It's gonna be a good time as usual. And the stakes were really raised in the 5th book, so excited to see how this 6th one goes. Okay, so I promised you crazy, and next up we have the crazy. Now, thankfully, this is not the same person that I gave the wild card to, but it started strange and just got weirder. And if I hadn't been doing this for a YouTube video, I probably would have run about 1,000 miles, but here we are. So someone added me and immediately said, "Do you have Snapchat?" and gave me a username. So I went, okay, this is strange behavior, but I'm going to add them on Snapchat because, you know, I was desperate for book recommendations from Tinder people, which is much harder to get than you would expect, or maybe you're less delusional than I was. Anyway, when I said hello to them on Snapchat, they said, "Hi, who are you?" And I said, "I added you from a Tinder profile," that immediately blocked me. And they went, "Oh, that sucks." And then we kind of started talking, and I figured, okay, I mean, this may just be a random person, but maybe I can get them to recommend me a book anyway. So this actually worked really well. They were being really talkative. I asked them, "Do you want sci-fi or fantasy?" And they said, "Fantasy. I love fantasy. I love magic." And then I gave them my list of goals, and they opted for a non-male author. And I then gave them my list of books. And the cool thing about Snapchat was I was able to give them screenshots of the covers, which saved me a lot of time in writing out descriptions, and was just a bit nicer, I think. So I gave them 5 options. The first was The Killing Spell, then Ship of Destiny, The Girl with 1,000 Faces, The Ninth Reign, and finally A Song of Legends Lost. Then things got a little strange. So most people, after I'd given them a list of books, picked one of the books. She instead opted to ask me what my love language was, which then caused immediate panic, because that wasn't part of my script that I had written in my head. You can see how I reacted very well, I thought, given she was being strange. Then she started talking about Joey Tribbiani for some reason. I think she'd brought up that she was watching Friends earlier and sent me a photo of the TV with Friends on it, and so it wasn't really relevant to picking a book. Then things got stranger still, because she asked me to you can see the messages. I just wanted her to pick one of the books from the list, and at this point I was in too deep and probably wasn't. I probably could have just blocked her, but I wanted her to pick a cover. Then she said she was going to control me, to which I responded, "Could you control which books I pick?" Which was, I mean, very witty. And then she said, "Subscribe to my OnlyFans," to which I said, "I will subscribe to your OnlyFans if you pick a book." And she then picked a book and I blocked her. Anyway, I'm very excited to be reading The Girl with 1,000 Faces. This is another arc that I have, and this one comes out in May. This looks so... Firstly, the cover is stunning. And secondly, the story sounds incredible. It's set in Hong Kong and it's supposed to weave together different mythology, folklores, ghost stories, all into this tale of a woman with 1,000 faces. So I am super hyped to get into this one. Actually, ironically, probably my favorite of the picks so far. But, you know, could have happened in a slightly less strange manner. After this one, I took a break from trying to do this video because I was like, this was crazy. Anyway, the content's good, I guess. I'm never doing this again. Please like and subscribe to this video, I swear. Okay, finally we had the 5th book. This is the wild card, and I spoke to a guy that was really nice and lovely and normal. Wonderfully normal, and we had a bit of a chat. He was also really into fantasy and from America, visiting London for a while. I believe his name was Logan, and I decided this was going to be the guy that I would let pick and choose at random, given that he knew a bit about books and fantasy. He took a couple of swings at it before he managed to recommend me something that I hadn't already read. First, he recommended The Skullmancer, and I was like, this guy knows ball. Then he recommended Aragon, and I was like, maybe he doesn't. And finally, he recommended a book that I had never even heard of before. The Frog Princess. This is a middle grade book, nice and short, so if it's rubbish, it doesn't matter too much, but it looks kind of interesting. It's about a princess called Emma who is very far from the typical princess. Her laugh is like a donkey's bray, she's clumsy, and the prince she is supposed to fall in love with, she simply doesn't love. Now, when she is convinced to kiss a prince who has been turned into a frog in order to turn him back into the human, as is typical with the fantasy fairy tale story, she instead turns into a frog herself. That's a really cool concept, so I'm super stoked to get into this one, and I'm very glad that I ended up with a random book that's actually pretty good, because that could have gone horribly wrong. So those are my 5 books. I may try and do a video like this again, but try on a different dating app. So if you are interested in that, please do like, subscribe, comment, do all of those things, because if I did all of this and this video gets 5 views, I will be sad.
3, 6, 5, go. 3, 6, 5, go. 3, 6, 5, go.